Hello, Dr. Tate. This is Marlene, and this is my course, Exploring the Spice Trade. As you can see, I've presented a welcome to potential students, and I've talked a little bit about myself, why I think this class is important, and I'm trying to present it in such a way that they are interested right on the front end about this class. So one of the things I propose to them is one of the interesting things about history that I've discovered is that while costumes change, the human character remains much the same. What can we learn from people who are very much like ourselves? What insights can we gain to better understand our world and ourselves from these citizens of another time? And then I go on to talk about how the spice trade is a story of cultural intrigue. It's beautiful and tragic. Within it, we see the rise and fall of wealth and kingdoms um, that go along with the trade. It spun exploration and conquest and cultural ideas and exchanges over its history that still influence our lives today. So I'm tying the past to the present there. So then I go on to talk about information in the course. Uh, so I'll be using open educational resources, so there's no textbook for them. There's no prerequisite either, but if they have a background in history or Western Civ, it'll be helpful to them, but it's not absolutely necessary. And then I talk about some of the tools and things that we'll be using during the course so that they'll know there'll be some media involved. And then I talk about our final project. And I want it to be a really creative opportunity for them to create something interesting that really pulls all the, that has the opportunity to pull the content together in the context of what they've learned, so it has real buy-in and value to them. And then, of course, I talk about the grades. All right, and then I visit with them about course requirements, accommodations, and policies, as you can see, and then how to contact me. So the policies are in the menu, and we'll go take a look at that. So we have course requirements, accommodation, and policies. We talk about Blackboard student support, the Disability Center, university policies, course policies, and so on. I'll let you take a look, and then I listed my references for where I got that information. Okay, let's move on to learning content. So this is our course, and I have 8 units. They run 2 weeks each for a 16-week course. So I needed an anchor for when we would start thinking about the spice trade. So in this section, I have an introduction to the Phoenicians, who were, really the first seafaring trading people who actually left the Mediterranean and went into the Atlantic and up the coast to England and then south down the African coast to trade goods. So I used them as the pivotal point to begin our adventure learning about the spice trade. So you see I have my learning objectives listed, followed by activities, learning materials, and I have media, I have video, I have a podcast, I have readings for them, maps, articles, and I listed my references so that they could, find those rather easily if they needed to. And then I have my formative and summative assignments. So we'll take a look at this assignment. So here we're talking about a self-introduction. I want them to get to know each other and develop a learning community. So I'm asking them to put together a 1 to 2 minute video podcast and to share that with their classmates in the discussion board. So tell us about who you are and why you're interested in this topic, and also share something that you are especially interested in that might not be in the class but is related to the trade world and history and so on and so forth. And I'm sharing with them that if they do not have a YouTube channel, that now's the time to create that, since they're going to create a little podcast for us. And they'll be using that later on in this course as well. So we're talking about My Silk Road Journal, which is really a blog, but they're going to use it as a journal, and I'll share more about that here in a moment. Okay, let's go back and take a look at the other assignment that we have. In the assessments area, I went ahead and restated the objectives because I thought that might be helpful for them to take another look at those before they really started in on their assignments. So just experimenting with that idea. So we're going to talk about the Silk Road, and here in this first one I've laid everything out with an overview statement, why it's important, and sharing with them that I want them to try to experience this history as if they were there. And in order to do that, I want them to take on a persona as they write in their journals. So basically, so I'm going to set this up for them. So I've created the Silk Road Journal, which is actually a blog, and they can use the blog tool of their choice. And the reason for doing this is to give to them sort of a virtual time machine where in each unit they're going to be a personification of an individual who lives in this particular time, and they'll be taking the information that they're going to study and putting that together to create a character and then tell me about what they're experiencing. And of course, they're going to have to include information in the context of the learning assignments so that I know that they've read the material, that they understand the material. So here we're laying out how that's going to flow throughout the course, and I've given them suggestions about what it is I'm looking for in the way of things that they need to include in their narrative story. The other thing we'll be beginning to work on is a little mini research paper. And I want them to select an item that they're interested in that relates to the spice trade. And I'm also going to ask them later on that if in their research they find something that branches off from their paper, to consider using that information in another assignment. The next unit is Traveling the Silk Road, and we'll be talking about that a little bit. Again, I have video information for them. I've laid this out with a narrative introduction, the learning objectives, the learning activities, the media is listed, and also we have readings available to us. Maritime maps, there's all kinds of information here about the spices and so on and so forth. And then I have assignments and assessments, and we'll take a quick look at those. Again, I've listed out this information. In this assignment, we're talking about continuing the research paper, and this is the branching off area. You know, if there's something that you discover that is a subtopic, you know, keep your information about that, keep your references, because you might want to use that later. Then this is followed up by an assessment, which is summative. And again, this is the Silk Road Journal. I've restated the objectives for them. And then here is the assignment for this week. The Phoenicians certainly made their mark on the maritime trade. In this week's journal, you're going to make your way to India's spice market. The market is a rich place of a convergence of spices and trade goods from China to Madagascar. Tell me what it's like. So there you have your bullet points for information that I'm looking for in the narrative story. And of course, they'll be linking this to their blog, and that link will come back to other students who will be able to read that information. All right, the mongrels and the golden horde. Kublai Khan. Again, a narrative followed by learning objectives, activities, media content. Who is Genghis and Kublai? Very interesting story there. Reference. And there is no assignment with this one because the assessment is a little more heavier weighted, I think. We're going to do our usual entry into the journal. And then we'll be starting an Adobe Spark project. And here I've given a description of what that will be like, what I'm looking for in the project, and information regarding what that content should be like. All right, let's move on. After the mongrels, we'll go to Venice. Venice becomes a superpower of trade in this particular time. They play the middleman between the Eastern and the Western world. So we're sharing that information here with an introduction, objectives, learning activities, some video, I believe I have a podcast in here, readings, followed by references and the assignments. So in this assignment, they're going to be creating a poster about Venice in the marketplace. It's kind of an advertising. They're going to be talking about the spices, herbs, and other goods that they're going to find in Venice. And they can use one of these tools to create that poster, and then they're going to post that link to the discussion board for comments and peer review. The Byzantines and the Ottoman Turks. Again, a narrative introduction, followed by learning objectives, learning activities. And I found these very good history lessons based on some video game content. Evidently, they have, I was able to find these very exceptional game-based videos on history, which they've pulled together to make these resources. They're pretty amazing. I'm going to show you one of them. Okay, well, see, I think that's good quality and very interesting visually for our learners. So, and again, we have the readings, references, and assignments. So let's take a look at my summative for this one. And that is to go to the discussion board and discuss the fall of Constantinople. And there is a very interesting reason why it fell. Constantinople fell for many reasons, and some of them are very intriguing. And so I want the students to really think about that and be able to verbalize that, because it's one of those very decisive moments in history that they really need to understand. And here is my assessment for them. Again, we have the objectives listed here, and then we're going to go and write out our journal, our weekly journal, and share that with the class. Next, we have Portugal and Spain. Same format. Our activities, our learning materials, and of course these everywhere that we have a line out, these link out, and this is really quite interesting. For centuries, folks with big boats could not get around the Cape of Africa, and there is a real reason for that. And so they'll discover that as a part of this lesson. All right, let's see here. And then we have our assignments. Let's take a look. I'm going to have them put together a graphical chart. I want them to list 10 herbs and spices, and I would like for them to include an image of that spice or herb, its name, its origin, its location origin, and its use, whether it's ritual, like in religious ritual, or rites for a number of things, if it was used for medicine, if it's used, for worship or whatever. There are so many things, perfumes, preservation of food, and flavoring, and all kinds of reasons that people use spices and herbs, and I want them to be aware of that. So they'll be putting that together in a graphical chart. This is a link to the guidelines that I provided in the first iteration. And now we are dealing with the English and the Dutch, who are fiercely competitive. Again, an overview, followed by activities and learning materials. The media is listed out. There are links to it. This is a podcast. This is a brief history of the East India Company, followed with the trade routes and the readings for this section. And let me take a look and see what our assignment was. So in this week's assignment, the students are to create a video or podcast about your topic, about a topic. I've asked them to include their references for this information, and that it shouldn't be more than a couple of minutes long. And then they're going to put this on their YouTube channel, and this channel is going to be important for later on. We're going to tie all of this together, and then they're going to share that link in the discussion, and then do a peer review and provide feedback. And then our last unit in this course is a project. I'm still kind of putting that all together. But basically what I want them to do is to take the content that they have created throughout this course and really utilize that into creating a Facebook history page about the spice trade. So I want to divide them up into groups, and because each one has done something different, a different paper, a different this, a different that, that context should have enough variety that it's interesting. This way the students can utilize modern technology to tell the story about the spice trade. And I think it ties it all together very nicely, and I think some of our really savvy students in the class will begin to understand that globalization and trade has been going on for centuries. It's not a new phenomenon, and it works very much now as it did then, only the technology is improved. So that's basically the point of it, and so hopefully the students will be able to use this information, relate to this information, improve their critical thinking skills, and understand very much how globalization is still a part of our world. So that is my connection to the past. Okay. Oh, I just wanted to add one other thing just to let you see that I do have the discussion board lined out for each section. Materials, and then this is the link to our various journal entries. I know that went way over, so I hope you don't mind. I just felt like I had a lot to cover. All right, thanks, Dr. Tate.